I think the future is very bright. The region is just simply growing, and it's going to take a lot to slow it down. We can screw it up on both sides of the border, but the underlying momentum is just fabulous. And again, it's important because it's important to the U.S. that Mexico succeed. It's important to Mexico that the U.S. succeeds. And I think that can happen if we just simply get the right mix of people, policies, and investment. There is no telling what this region is going to look like in 2050. So with that, I'll stop and I'll take any questions that folks may have. And again, thank you very much for having me here tonight. And I'm more than happy to sit down, too. So, that's right. The question for those who couldn't hear is, when will we have an NFL team in the McAllen mission area? The flippant answer would be, when will we have one in Dallas? But putting that to the side, which hurts as a Cowboys fan. The short answer is I don't know, but of interest, if you ever come to McAllen and you're looking for a place to stay, there is a hotel, the Hawthorne Suites, that is in our development. That was actually developed originally as a training camp facility for the Dallas Cowboys. That was a messy process. That was a great example of North Texans not quite fully understanding the way that things work down in South Texas. And so that never came to pass, as you know. And I think everybody involved in that process has learned from it. My hope would be sooner rather than later. Again, going back to the stereotypes, personally, I'll say I was excited when they opened the Cracker Barrel in McAllen. I think, and I mean that very sincerely for those that know me, but I think the more interesting thing is I don't think people are expecting to see Land Rover or Jaguar dealerships in McAllen. The mall in McAllen is actually one of the most profitable malls that exists anywhere in this country. They have a Foley's department store there that has the highest grossing revenue per square foot of any Foley's anywhere in the U.S. And a lot of that's driven with folks coming out of Monterey, driving up, stopping there on the way to South Padre. But there is a tremendous amount of wealth, and there's a tremendous amount of folks looking for a richer lifestyle. They're looking for culture. And I would hope that you see that develop over time. I'd love to sit here and say we're working on it. We are not. And don't take the Cowboys. Well, we're happy with them in Texas. We'll win another Super Bowl. It'll be good. So, yes, sorry.
Yes, hello. I think that if we talk generation and transmission, the bottleneck is infrastructure. And that is so important in that region where you are doing the Sharyland interconnection. On the other hand, I think that there has been a lot of lack of communication between Mexican authorities, the U.S., and Canadian too. Yes. I don't know what happened with that North American Energy Working Group that apparently is not existing now. Do we need to address tri-national North American energy integration more in the future? I think so. I think the quest is how to turn a utility into a tradable good.
I completely agree. And actually, there is an initiative in the State Department, of all things, looking at that, trying to, again, not just the U.S., Mexico, but across all of North America, to integrate in the energy infrastructure and resources. You know, there are a lot of stereotypes, I think, that exist. And just a quick history of our DC interconnection. It had been contemplated in law, actually. The verbiage was there to allow us to put in a DC interconnection that wasn't there solely to support reliability, but actually had a policy directive as its main driver of supporting cross-border trade. But it had never really been done before. And so when we went into the regulatory process, there were a lot of firsts along the way from that perspective. You know, it is interesting to me. It took us, we tend to move relatively quickly as a company. We're a little bit smaller than a lot of our other brethren, and When we decide to do something, we try to do it before we either screw it up or the opportunity goes away. And so with the DC interconnection, we first started studying that in earnest in 2002, working with CFE, who were fabulous to work with. We filed for regulatory approval in Texas in November of 2003, and we filed for our DOE presidential permit at that point in time. We received our presidential permit in about 10 months, and we received our approval from the PUC. It was closer to 15 to 16 months. And then you move over to the Mexican side, and the usual kind of response that goes, oh, wow, that must have been a nightmare. It was 5 months. And actually, a CFE is very quick to point out, if you go look at the electric grid in northern Mexico versus South Texas, theirs is actually in healthier shape than ours is. So we actually found it pretty easy to do work with CFE. In fact, I would argue that the previous CEO of CFE who just stepped down, Alfredo Elias, I would put up against any CEO of any Fortune 100 company in the US or in Europe or anywhere else. I think there's a willingness on the business side. I do think that it's hard getting the attention of policymakers sometime. And then there are a few things that need to get sorted out. Contractually, you need to underpin financing. And again, one of the things that frustrates us is we don't need incentives to go build infrastructure. I don't know why you incent people to do things they want to do. That is a waste of government money. We want to build infrastructure. We don't need higher ROEs from FERC, and we don't need people saying you need to do this. What we need is regulatory certainty, frankly. We need barriers removed from that to where we know if we start in a project and we commit large dollars of capital, it'll be there. We would view that not as foregoing incentives, we'd view that as risk-weighted rates of return. You can either give people an adder and toss them into a regulatory process, or you can not give them an adder, please give us still a very healthy rate of return on our equity, but remove some of the political risk or some of the structuring risk associated with it. And I'm not sure that the dialogue on the U.S. side is properly focused from that perspective. There are a lot of folks lined up to build more here. It's just a question of coming up with the right policies.
Mr. Hunt, just a fascinating speech. I really appreciate you coming and give this to us. One of the things you didn't mention, though, is the gradient across the border in terms of a lot of economic indicators like household income, for example. How important do you think that is on the U.S. side, and what role should the U.S. do in trying to even out that gradient?
You're talking about the income delta as you cross. It's important, and I think it's something that the longer term really needs to be reviewed.